and welcome to Discussion Today. I'm Tina Jha. On the show today, we will talk about the forest fires in the hill state of Uttarakhand. At least 85 forest fires are said to be raging in Uttarakhand and have destroyed more than 165 acres of land in just the past 2 days. The worst affected districts include Pauri, Almora, Nainital, Pithoragarh and Tehri. The centre has deployed the National Disaster Relief Force and also pressed the Indian Air Force helicopters into service to douse the forest fires. According to the State Forest Department, Uttarakhand has witnessed over 1,000 incidents of forest fire since the beginning of this year, in which more than 1,300 hectares of forest land has reportedly been damaged. And not just in Uttarakhand, since January 1st this year, there have also been a series of forest fires in Himachal Pradesh, Nagaland-Manipur border, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, and also in Gujarat, including in the wildlife sanctuaries. So on Discussion Today, we will analyse what causes forest fires, the reasons for their increased occurrence, and why is it difficult to douse such forest fires. We'll also try and understand from experts the strategy and efforts that may be required to monitor and control such incidents in future. Joining me on the program are two distinguished panelists. Let me introduce them to you. I'm joined on the program today by Dr. A.D. Kaushik. He is former Centre Head, Forest and Biodiversity, National Institute of Disaster Management, and Professor C.K. Varshni, his environmentalist and former Dean, School of Environment Sciences, JNU. Welcome, gentlemen, on this edition of Discussion Today. Dr. Kaushik, let me begin the program today with you. So, a series of forest fires have been reported from several states, Himachal Pradesh, Odisha, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, also Nagaland-Manipur border, and just about 1,000 fires in Uttarakhand alone. Help us and our viewers understand first, what is causing these forest fires at this time of the year?
Actually, the fire in the Uttarakhand region and other part of the hill area as well as the northeast states, they are badly affected by the number of event of forest fire. Sometimes it is maybe natural or maybe due to man-made. If we compare the data of last decade or 20 decade, 2 decades before, we will find that the forest fire events are occurred due to the next region. But as per the population increasing and the people are entering in the forest area and disturbing the forest habitat, they not only increasing the number of events and due to carelessness of the people who are living in the forest area, they are responsible to cause the fire in this region.
Okay.
Forest department and the foresters, they are very responsible for check or to control the forest fire. But as an IDM point of view, if we talk that what should we do? Because the causes of the forest fire are increasing and our carelessness, I think today is the event of the forest fire or increasing area of the forest area under the forest fire. It is due to the mainly our negligence or carelessness of the people living in this area as well as the government officials too. They are not sincere towards their duties in this region. Because if we compare the British time, 1926, we find they are very alert. They go for the forest fire line. Forest fire line means they collect the litter in the forest area and burn it in controlled manner. They understand their duty. Foresters, forest rangers, they understand their duty. And then they are able to control the forest fire. But that time the population of the are not more in comparison to today. Because today we are encouraging in the river, we are encroaching the forest area. Where? So disasters are, events of disaster are increasing. So we talk about the forest fire event. Why in 2016? Why it is 2018? Why it is 1995? There are some examples. These are conclusion there. These are our totally carelessness.
Okay.
Regarding the causes, when we know, and today, the disaster management point of view or disaster point of view, we know that the forest event occurred during the month from the month of February to June. This is the time where the events of the forest fires are maximum. But we can control it. We can go for preparedness.
Absolutely.
We
So
can
how
adapt the
we can
preparedness.
prepare is something that I'll come back to you and understand. Let me bring in Professor Vashni into the discussion. Professor, during these months, February to June, as Dr. Kaushik pointed out, forest fires are not uncommon. And of course, this we have seen over the years. This happens particularly in Uttarakhand. But what is of concern is the growing incidences of forest fires. Their frequencies are increasing every year. What explains that? Is it just carelessness that Dr. Kaushik points out, or is there more to it? How much of a role do you see the climatic changing conditions in forest fires?
I think that the conditions by today are quite different than what they were 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago. The new factor which is now responsible is the climate change, and the temperatures are increasing, and the rain pattern is also changing. You see, last year we had a deficit of rainfall, and as a result, the areas were dry. Or at the same time, you will find that record high temperatures have been recorded during early March and late February. And as a result, dry area as well as high temperature welcomes and encourages forest fires. All these causes are very important. We have also to remember that many times tourists are also very careless. And when they are campfiring, then they are not careful enough to douse the fire. And also, sometimes even those people who do poaching, they deliberately burn the area so that the animals can run and they can trap them and so on. So I think there are multiple reasons, but the increase in forest fire is largely can be attributed to the climate change, which is going on at a rapid pace.
Yes.
And I must also mention that it is not only in the India, but even outside, the number and incidences and duration of forest fire is increasing everywhere. And this is something which we have to really reckon with. There are 3 implications of that about which we should really be very, very informed about it. Number 1, the carbon stock of the forest is really depleted in a big way. The smoke that comes out of the forest fire affects local people. In fact, we can really put the impact of the forest fire at 2 levels, local as well as global. At a global level, it increases the carbon burden on the atmosphere, which is the main cause of global warming. At a local level, it really suffocates people, affects health of the people, as well as it takes away the livelihood. Because after the forest fire is over, the forest becomes more or less much less dense and its canopy is very much reduced.
Absolutely.
And the soil are very much baked. And as a result, they become hygroscopic. That is, they do not allow sufficient water to penetrate into the ground, and which later on affects our groundwater resources in a big way. And when the rains follow after the June, in July or late June, then you will find that the same area which has suffered forest fire also becomes a cause of flood. And as the flood takes away the ash, along with goes the nutrient. So the site becomes very, very poor in terms of nutrient, and the biodiversity is greatly affected. Now, trees are burning and the leaves are burning. That is very clear, because as the leaf fall takes place, a large amount of litter gets collected. And about the Himachal Pradesh and about the Uttar Pradesh, there is one thing which is very peculiar, that we have got large tracts of pine forest, and the needles are recalcitrant. They do not decay very easily and make a very large, thick cushion, and they are very inflammable. So they burn. At the same time, pine itself has large amount of rosin and the resin tapping, etc., and which is highly inflammable. Of course, it is a source of turpentine oil and rosin, which are very important for making turpentine oil and paints and so on and so forth. But at the same time, they are very much there to really encourage the fire. So I think dry atmosphere, high temperature are the preconditions for these fires to really ignite. And the frequency has increased, the duration has increased, the intensity of fire. So there are three things that have increased, not only the incidence, but at the same time, the area has increased, the intensities have increased,
Yes.
and the longer that and the duration of the fire has also increased. And at
Okay.
the same time, the amount of care and the preparation for controlling the fire has not been matching with the threat and with the challenge that we are facing because of these many different factors.
Okay, Dr. Kaushik. So as Professor Varshni says, there are three things that have increased: the frequency, the duration, and the intensity. So keeping all these factors in mind, the next big question that comes is, how should we be prepared? What are the current techniques that we are using to douse these fires? Because clearly what we have seen this time around is the state is grappling to control the damage, and that's where it has sought intervention from the center. So what are the kind of techniques that need upgradation if we have to control these forest fires in future as well?
Question is how to control the event of the forest fire, which are increasing every year. And I think they are is a fire triangle. In burning of the forest fire is a fire triangle work. Fire triangle means for fuel, oxygen, and heat. One of them is not there, though no fire. If all these three factors will be there, the fire will be more. So, question I am locating: the oxygen is there, heat is there, but what type of fuel? So it is due to climate change, the higher drier conditions, low soil moisture conditions in the hilly areas, they increasing the event because falling of the leaves, falling of the tubes. There are three types of fuel actually found in the forest area. First is ground fuel, second is surface fuel, and third is aerial fuel. So my question is, as a disaster management point of view, when we know that the forest fire event started or initiated from the February to June, we can, the foresters or with the local people, we can manage, we can go preparedness, as in case of cyclone in coastal areas. We are well managed it by our well preparedness. Therefore, we are able to decrease the number of deaths in the coastal area in comparison to super cyclone 1999 in experience. So same pattern we can also adapt as a preparedness point of view in the case of forest fires. We can collect the ground fuel, we can collect the surface fuel, we can collect the aerial fuel. We can identify the area where aerial fuel is there, where is ground fuel is more, where is surface fuel is more. We can collect it and in control manner, we can burn it. And therefore, the incident of number of incidents will be decreased.
Absolutely.
As well as when the number of incidents will decrease, the area will also be very less to be affected. First, in the case of forest, national forest policy, we always keep the people away. Government officials not include the local people in the management of the forest fire. But it is now it is realized by the forest department or Ministry of Forest or Environment Forest, there is a need of the local people because local wisdom, local knowledge is very essential in controlling of the fire because our geography of the hilly area is very typical in comparison to USA and other countries. I also seen the fire of USA in California from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, where I was traveling by car. Is it very they can easily control by the helicopter or by the spraying of the water on the can. But in case of Uttarakhand or in the hilly area of India, it's not possible.
Yes.
We cannot use the heavy equipment in controlling or to throwing the water on the affected area. But we have simple manner by which we can preparedness. We can adapt the strategy of the preparedness before the peak time. That is from February to June. We were earlier in December or in November, we can go for the manage. We can collect the ground fuel, we can collect the surface fuel, we can collect the aerial fuel.
Absolutely. Professor
Then
Vashni,
we
so
are able to manage the event of the forest fire and to decrease the area of the forest fire. Because as Professor Vashni told that there is a high temperature, we cannot control it. But as the number of people will increase in the area, so number of carbon will automatically increase and the greenhouse effect will be more. Then how we can manage it?
definitely,
We
the
can
implications
manage
are going
only
to be
through
huge.
our preparedness.
Professor Vashni, so on the preparedness front, there are two things that Dr. Kaushik is suggesting. One, of course, is that we need a model that can predict such disasters to occur in the first place. And the second is coordination with the local community. What more can be done if we are to adopt an effective strategy in terms of first preventing such incidents from taking place, and when they happen, do we have a mechanism to monitor them in real time and then take steps to control the damage?
I think that I will classify the methods of controlling forest fire in two categories. First is the kind of immediate and to attend to these situation at a local level. And that is the kind of thing that one must start preparing well in advance. That is, from the month of November onwards, we should identify these areas where it is likely to be high temperature and also considering the previous rainfall pattern. Now, that is one thing. But I think this is not a permanent solution. And this kind of a thing will not really work. Because every year, the number of incidences are going to increase, which means greater and greater effort is needed.
Yes.
And most of us, we know that the hilly tracts are many times inaccessible and cannot be approached so easily. And they are very dangerous, really, for the people to continue for this work. And this is something on which labor is required as well as capital is required. And I think this is, to my mind, is very strenuous. But when we do nothing, then perhaps this is the only thing that we can do. And this can also not ensure that forest fire will not be there. But the more important thing is that what we have to do is to really encourage the natural vegetation to continue to grow. And that is the forest conservation is very important. We are now working very seriously about regenerating the forest water points or the wetlands or the areas where there are springs. So springs regeneration is taking place. Similarly, we have to generate the vegetation so that it is able to retain more moisture in the soil. We have to increase more moisture. Whatever little rain comes, we have to increase that. And the only way that we have to increase is that by growing more vegetation and by increasing biodiversity. But once there is a fire, the entire seed bank gets burned and its regeneration becomes very difficult because the soil which was having the seeds, which ultimately really have to come up, they also get burned. And at the same time, the microflora, which is very important for forest trees to grow, because the fungus in association with the roots of the trees provides nutrition. So all these things become dead and it becomes a early or the first layer or the early layer of the soil becomes almost a desert. So I think the seeds are devoid of, the fungus is not there, and therefore trees or whatever vegetation comes following rains becomes very poor and is not able to really take care of the site properly. And such sites become continuously spots of forest fire in the future because less and less. And there is one more thing which I want to tell you, that once there is a fire, then after the fire is over and controlled by various efforts, the unburnt log finally fall down on the ground, which increases the burning biomass further. And therefore, the site continuously gets poorer and poorer and really becomes a site where the forest fire is encouraged because it gets exposed, more heat, more sun, and less water. And I think, therefore, it is very important that in the first place, we have to think of two methods. One, the short-term method, which has been suggested by Dr. Kaushik, and the other is long-term measures. And these long-term measures include global warming containing, which is a global issue, but at a regional level, I think the conservation of vegetation, encouragement of biodiversity, and as diverse community is there, the water retention will be more. Although whatever rain comes, it will be retained there. And thus, the period for which the soil will remain moist will be much larger and much longer. And therefore, it will reduce the incidence of the forest fire in a very natural way, where we have to really not spend so much hard labor. So I think all these things have to be put together. It cannot be just, we cannot rely on just one method. And that is the reason which we have to really work out. And I find that very little has been done in respect of really deciding that what kind of measures and what kind of effort is needed, how much is needed, and where it is needed. That kind of a preparation seems to be lacking. What is required is a important, proper diagnosis, as well as a proper working paper, which becomes available to everyone. And the more than that, it is all the government departments which have to really coordinate that. And the information must flow fast. From a satellite, we can always detect a fire, and this information must descend and must come to the local level immediately, so that necessary steps can be taken to douse the fire when it remains small. Sometimes wind plays a spoil sports. So the windy condition which have prevailed also really fence it. Fires are of three types: ground fire as well as ground fire. And I think the ground fire is one which can be controlled by the methods that had been suggested by Dr. Kaushik. But the ground fire cannot. And sometimes wind will ultimately becomes and really encourages ground fire. And that becomes very difficult. So I think all these things have to be thought very carefully, and a very concerted effort has to be made to prepare a comprehensive plan of controlling fires in Uttarakhand as well as in the forest of the country, which are becoming increasingly susceptible to the forest fire from year to year because of the climate change and because of the pattern of the rainfall, as well as high amount of biotic pressure and human interference in the forest area.
Absolutely. Dr. Kaushik, one last comment from you, because both short-term and long-term measures have been very aptly explained by Professor Varshni. But for a state like Uttarakhand, that since the year 2000 has nearly lost about 50,000 hectares of land to forest fires, what are the challenges, and going forward, what are the special efforts that will be required to protect the state, the forest land in Uttarakhand from such kind of fires in future? Apart from coordination and predictive modeling that you have pointed out earlier.
As here challenges is definitely a challenge in front of us, and I think it can be overcome on this problem of the forest fire if we socially involve the people, or as you saw, the coordination among the NGOs and the government officials. And properly they manage, and within time we identify this area sincerely, and we locate the different areas. For example, in Uttarakhand, in Dehradun, there is a master control room was set up by the Uttarakhand government in Uttarakhand, Dehradun, for Masuri Forest Division. But in this time, this forest fire is a Kamayu region, where there is no master control room. This master control room is actually designed to know the moisture content, what is the wind direction, what is it. They are actually inform the department within time, and they accordingly they manage this. So same shift time, but it is initially initiated, but after due to lack of fund or any, this was not carefully managed, and this master control is not working at all this time. I conducted so many program on forest fire along with in collaboration with Forest Research Institute, FRA Dehradun, And in each program, we make a field visit or for the master control room to the participant. The participants on different part of the country, from south and northeast state, and they also see how the master control room work it. But what they have learned, they are the officer, forest officer, principal, chief conservator, and so they are actually set up these master control room. I think I know data is such type of this. They are actually interested in control the master control room.
Okay,
These are very important issues by which we can manage in coordination with the local people, local wisdom, and our disaster management strategies, and in existing the extreme conditions as per the high temperature, they are the challenges for us.
Absolutely, multiple challenges, but of course there are some short-term and long-term measures that have been pointed out by Professor Varshni that all stakeholders will have to together work upon, and only then we can work towards protecting our forests from such ravaging fires. Time is running out. I'll have to wind up the discussion at this point. Thank you to both my guests once again for joining us on the program and putting your thoughts with us and sharing your perspective with us and our viewers. Pleasure having you on the show. So that's it from us on this edition of Discussion Today. Thank you very much for your time.